If we look at this example and we try to add a JFrame to our GUI code or GUI application, then this is a JFrame that we can work with and can add components to this JFrame, like this button on the screen. We can create a JFrame by right clicking, and we can see this option JFrame form. You can see that you can add JDialog form, JFunnel form, and you might have other options as well. You can create a JFrame form. If you go to the other, you might be able to add other forms of, like for example JApplet. If you want to work with applets, applets can also be used to create graphics in Java. So we want to add a JFrame, so we will choose the JFrame, and if you wanted to add another kind of, for example, a JFrame form or JDialog form, you can add those as well. You give a name to your JFrame form. But I will leave it as the default, and this will create a JFrame on my screen. I can now work with this JFrame. I can add components to this JFrame. You can see that these are the containers, swing containers that I can add to this JFrame. For example, a panel that we just saw. This is, I want to add a panel to this. Panel will allow me to select an area on my JFrame form to be able to add and group other components. For example, I can add a button to this JFrame, this JPanel, or this panel. I can add labels. For example, you can add a label. Let's say you can edit the text by right clicking, and I can add text to the label. I can add text to my button. You can edit text. Press me or click me. You can see we have added text to, and these are grouped inside this panel. You can see you can have all of these options. For example, you can add a text field to your panel. This will be part of your JFrame. You can modify the text. For example, you can add an informative label with your fields. Let's say if you are asking the user to enter their name, so you edit the text on the label, and you can then use the text field. You can make it empty, or you can add any default text to this text box. So this is your text field that you can use to take input from the user. We'll be using all of these, most of these components, some one by one. These are the properties that we can choose from. You can choose a background color, you can choose the font that you want to use, and there are plenty of options that you can choose from that we will be working with along these lectures. And if you look at the source code that is created by default for you, these are the components that we added to our JFrame. We created a JFrame. For example, it has created a JFrame for us, whatever the name of our JFrame form was. New JFrame 1 extends the swing library, the JFrame class of the swing library, and this code is added by default for us by the IDE. And once we added components to our JFrame, these are the variables in the form of these variables that we can change. Let's say if we go back to the design of the JFrame and you want to change the name of this button, by default this was JButton1. You can change the variable name. Let's say by right clicking you can change the name of the button. You write an understandable name, for example the names that we give to our variables, and we want the variable names to be understandable to us or to whoever is reading the code. For example, we can change the name of our labels, LBL name. Any understandable name will be good. And we can change the name of our text field as well, txt name. And now if you look at the code again, you can see that the names have been changed for us. We changed the name of the button, we changed the name of this label, and we changed the name of this text field, and we can see that the names have been changed for us. Now to talk about why do we need these different panels, for example we can add our components directly to the frame or to the JFrame form. Why do we need these panels? For example, if we want to group different components to on the same form, let's say we have added another panel to our form. You might use this one for the text fields and this one for the buttons, etc. There might be other reasons that you want to separate the designs for these two panels. And also we'll look at the properties. For example, if you right click on any of the components or the containers, you will see a bunch of things that you can achieve or do without any direct programming. So we might see some of these later on one by one, but let's look at this properties panel that we get when you click on the properties. And we can see that we can set the border, we can set the background color, we can set maybe the fonts, etc. Let's look at the color. For example, the background color. If you want to change the background color, I would want to change this to maybe a green color, and if I click OK and I close this portion of my form is now greener. And if I choose this one and I choose maybe another background color for this, let's say a red maybe, then we can see that we have these two panels side by side with each other. Now we can have different panels with different designs and different components and different colors within the same frame now, within the same form now. You can add more designs based on your aesthetic sense. You can go to the properties of your components. For example, if you right click on this component, let's say the text field, you can check the properties of this. As you can see, you want to make it editable. If you want the user to add text to it directly, otherwise you can uncheck this. You can change the background from the white. The colors are basically in the RGB form, so the red, green and blue combination of RGB. If you So a 000 will be black, and 255 and 255 will be a white color, and the rest of the colors will be combination of these colors. You can set the borders, you can set quite a few properties. For example, the font that the text box can have, you can choose from an option, the bold, italic boxes, and the type of the font from this list. The foreground will change the color of the font. Probably you can try different options, the ones you like, and similarly for the other components. As we can see, if you go to the properties, and this by default is the color, you can change the color maybe to something that you would want to prefer. Let's say a blue one, or a shade of blue. If you click OK, this the border of the button is now blue. Let's go to the properties again, and if we might change, similarly we can have a look at all the other properties. Like say for example, you can go down on this list, and there are a large bunch of properties that you can change and modify. For example, this is the label on the button that you can change. Rollover enabled, pressed icon, the container that it contains this component or this button, and you can also add an icon to your button. So for example, if you want to have an icon for your button and you have created one of your own icons, then you can add that icon by clicking over here and selecting the image that you want to add as an icon to your button. We will see in one of our examples later on that how can we add icons to our buttons or labels. But this is how you can do. If you have an icon, you can choose that icon from um, the location where we have stored the icon and add it to your button. Similarly, we can change the properties of our labels. Let's say if you look at the labels, then you can modify maybe the color, and you can change the other properties. The text field, you can add icons in the same way you can do for buttons, choosing your icon from the place that you have stored your icon. You can maybe add a border to our label just for the sake of understanding, and then you can play around with all of the rest of the properties. So a border has been added to our button over here, or our label over here, and some of the color of its border has been changed. Now if we run this, that will show us the form that we can have on the screen. So let's say this is our button, but we can see that we cannot achieve anything with this button. As you can see, if I keep clicking on this button, it won't achieve anything. We have not added any functionality to this button. We'll see with the help of an example as how we can add functionalities to our buttons, how can we add actions to our buttons. For example, if we click a button on the screen there, and that is what we use graphical user interfaces for. Now this is okay, but I cannot do anything with the text. I cannot. And similarly, this form at this moment is not responsive. We want our graphical user interfaces to be responsive. So we will start with an example of creating a calculator. Let's say we will create a very simple calculator where we click on a button and things should happen. For example, if we want to add two numbers, then we can use the graphical user interfaces. For example, if you want to create a calculator, we create a new project and we give it a name, maybe my calculator or something. We change the default folder to something of our own. And now we will add a JFrame form. And we will name this as calculator. So now we have a JFrame form, an empty JFrame form that we can add components to. First of all, I will add a panel to my JFrame form. Over here, this will be for the text field. Now a typical simple calculator has a text field over here, and what it allows us to do is to click on the buttons, display the number that we have clicked on in this text area, and then we have certain action buttons, for example addition, subtraction, and an equal button. The equal button calculates the output of the operation that we have chosen. I will add another panel over here for the buttons, so we can group all the buttons together. You can change the size of your form, you can change the size of your panels depending on the design that you want to choose. I will be choosing any random design that happens over here. So first of all, I will add a text field over here that will try to cover this entire area. So I have a text field that will display the number of the button that I click on. I will change the name of this text field, and this is important because I want to know the name of the text field that I want to, for example, modify or call methods on later on. We will rename it. You can change this default text. By default I would want it to not contain any text. Now we can add buttons, and we will be adding buttons to our second panel. I will add a button over here. You can change the designs of the button. So in a calculator, in our simple calculator, we will have buttons from 1 to 9 or 0 to 9, and then buttons for the equal symbol, the plus symbol, the minus symbol, division and subtraction symbols. We would want our designs to be similar to each other, so and the names to be understandable. For example, if this is for button 1, then I will change the name of this button to BTN 1. And similarly, I would want to display the text on this button. This is 1. You can change the properties of this text. For example, you can make it bolder, maybe, if you want to make it look prominent, etc. I will copy this button and paste it to create buttons with the same dimensions. So if I add, let's say, buttons 1 to 4 in one line, so this will be my button 2, this will be my button 3, this will be my button 4, and you can then align them with each other. Maybe this one is looking ugly, but you can play around with them. Now if I want to maybe reduce the size of my calculator, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this will be 8, this will be 7, this might be, and you can add 3 buttons in some and the same line, so you can maybe have a better design of your calculator. I will add a button for 0 over here, and then we'll have buttons for the other operations. So this is 5, this is 6, 7, 8, 9. I want this to be 0. Maybe I want this to look maybe bigger than the other button, so I make it a 0, and I will name these. So BTN 2, BTN 3, so that we know that these buttons, what number these buttons represent, each of these button represents. btn4, you can name it like 4 as well. You can name it like for you are btn5, btn6, btn7, nine, and btn0. You can also add other buttons. Let's say let's add some more buttons to our form. So this button is for, let's say, addition, or rather copy a button from over here so that we have the similar size buttons. Maybe another button for subtract, divide, multiply. You might have a dot button. I will add a dot button over here. So this is my button dot. Is it? I will name it btn dot. This should be my button for maybe plus. I will name it btn plus. This should be my button for subtraction. I will name it btn minus. This should be my button for, let's say, division, or you can and I will call it btn divide multiplication btn multiply and if I maybe add another button over here, let's say for clearing our text area, so I will let's see. Now you can change the order of the buttons and the design or the location of your buttons, or we will change the design of our calculator to make it look better maybe later, but for the moment we are working with whatever is coming our way. And we will add two more buttons. One will be for the equal symbol, that is an important symbol. So when we click the equal symbol, I think it doesn't fit in this area, so let's maybe drag it a little down. And I've tried. And we will have we will have a button for plus minus. This should change the symbol of whatever number that we want to change the symbol of it. If it is a plus, it will be converted to a minus, and vice versa. So I will name it BTN plus minus. Finally, I will have a button for the equal symbol, and I will call it BTN equal. So apparently I have completed the design of my calculator. Now some of the buttons might not look in place. You can play around with the design and come up with a better, more good looking design for our calculator. Now if we run this calculator, and we can see that we do have a calculator, but we still cannot do anything with this calculator. What we want to do is, like if I click a 1 over here, I should get a 1 over display a 1 in this area. If I click a 2 along with the 1, it should become 12. And if I let the C, it should clear the screen. If I plus any other symbol, it should add my previous number with the upcoming number when I press the equal button. This is how the basic minimum functionality that I want from my calculator. So let's try and add some functionality to our calculator.